Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're taking a unique plunge into, well, a pretty specific and sometimes intense corner of online activism within Israel. Our source is this fascinating YouTube video transcript, and our mission really is to unpack the motivations, the methods, and maybe the surprising impact of a particular online activist. His name's Morichai David. The source describes him as fearless, provocative too, and he's built up quite a significant online following. So let's explore what makes his approach, tick. Morichai David, he's presented in our source as someone who genuinely doesn't fear anyone. You can tell by his unique walking style. It projects this fearlessness. And he's also recently launched a new nonprofit. It's called Brothers for Justice, Kam Letzadak in Hebrew.
Yeah, what's really striking about his activism is just how direct it is. Unmediated, In an age where so much is filtered or anonymous online, his choice to physically go into confrontations, record them, share them widely, well, it speaks to a very deliberate strategy. Raw, it's immediate impact he's after, prioritizing exposure, direct challenge over maybe more traditional protest or dialogue.
Exactly. And his core method is incredibly direct. He actively seeks out protesters, specifically people referred to as Kaplanists. The protesters often on Kaplan Street in Tel Aviv, largely the anti-government judicial reform movements. So he confronts them, records these interactions, then uploads them. And his social media reach is huge, around 200,000 followers on TikTok, another 30,000 on Instagram. The source is clear. He looks for these confrontations, and apparently he'll push back physically if he's attacked.
This really makes you ask, doesn't it? Is the main goal here actual dialogue? Or is it fundamentally about public accusation, exposure? The source says he accuses them, shows their faces, although it does note he sometimes allows responses. But the overall feeling is that his main aim is showing his audience who they really are. He's building a specific narrative about his opponents.
Okay, now here's where it gets really interesting. His stated motivation, his conviction is, stark. He basically attributes the incitement during the judicial reform period as a direct cause for October 7th. And now he says these same protesters are accusing anyone against a hostage deal of murdering hostages. He feels that charge isn't just aimed at figures like Bibi or Ben-Gvir, but directly at him, and his supporters too.
Right. And that claim, it's not just about polarization, which is obviously intense. It's a profound rhetorical move. By saying political dissent directly caused a national tragedy, he effectively delegitimizes the opposition, doesn't he? It implies they're morally responsible for incredible suffering. It essentially turns political disagreement into something like, a charge of treason. That elevates the stakes way beyond policy. Political opposition becomes an existential threat in his framing.
And he shares some pretty jarring examples from his videos to back this up, or that he believes back this up. He talks about a protester who apparently assaulted a young border police soldier, and this protester was supposedly found with what David calls an Amalek in his house.
Amalek, yeah, that's a term from Jewish texts. Deeply rooted, often used for an ancient, implacable enemy, symbolizing an existential threat.
Right. And David claims this person is still free. He also describes a video where someone asks him, right to his face, "How many children did you murder today?" And where IDF soldiers are just openly called child murderers. He even claims protesters compared Jews to Delmar. That reference was a bit unclear in the source, maybe a name mix-up.
Could be. Or a specific reference we're missing.
But David presents it as someone who commits terror attack. And he really highlights the shock, he says, that some of these extreme statements come from people who used to support soldiers, but now call them murderers.
So when you look at these really charged personal accusations, these dramatic video clips, it's clear they feed into and frankly intensify the broader narrative, the already volatile conflict narrative. These aren't just isolated incidents in his view or in the view he presents. They become powerful tools. They reinforce divisions. They cement this sense of betrayal, animosity, rather than fostering any kind of understanding. They really just deepen the trenches between the opposing sides.
You can imagine, operating like this, he must face huge challenge. He mentions getting daily threats, demands from people, their families, to delete his videos.
Yes, and what's notable there is his unwavering stance despite all that. He explicitly says he has to provide a counter to what they're doing. He refuses to be silent while he sees them as inciting. He says he'll only make peace if the other side calms down too.
Which reflects his view, right, that the protest movement is getting more and more extreme. So his actions, in his mind, are a necessary response.
He also shares a pretty interesting observation about protest demographics. He claims the Kaplanist crowds are mostly older, like 60, 70 years old. Whereas right-wing protests, he says, attract a much younger crowd, mostly in their 20s. And he actually sees this older demographic on the left as good news for the future from his perspective. That observation, if it's backed up by wider data, it could suggest a big generational shift, a shift in political engagement, maybe values too. It hints at a potential long-term realignment, perhaps, where younger generations might be drawn to different ideologies, different ways of expressing them, that could really reshape the political landscape down the line as these groups gain influence.
Now, with his Brothers for Justice organization actually funded, his focus seems to be shifting to even more ambitious plan. He details his goals, like blocking the homes of left-wing activists. He specifically mentions Shikma Bressler, so mirroring the very tactics used by the protests he opposes.
Turning the tables, essentially.
Exactly. He also wants to put up IDF soldiers or heroes signs all over the country. A direct counter, he says, to IDF soldiers or murderers, signs seen at Kaplan. And maybe the most unique one, setting up tefillin stands at school entrances, specifically where he alleges teachers have spoken against tefillin or spread anti-IDF or anti-Jewish views, like calling Israelis occupiers or murderers.
Looking at the bigger picture here, that transition from one guy doing online activism to an organized, funded counter movement, that signifies a major escalation, doesn't it, in this ongoing culture war? It's a strategic move beyond just digital fight. It's into direct physical presence, trying to actively control the narrative in shared public spaces, even educational ones. This is about reshaping perception, not just online, but like on the ground, in community.
He also mentions his connection to Itamar Ben-Gvir. He notes they share an ideology, but says Ben-Gvir doesn't direct his action, suggesting David sees himself or operates as an independent force.
Right. And that connection, even if informal, it really underscores how grassroots movements can align, sometimes powerfully, with established political figures, even if they operate independently. That alignment reinforces their shared ideas, right? It can boost the reach, maybe the perceived legitimacy of both the activist and the politician. It's kind of a symbiotic influence loop.
And finally, he shares some really powerful personal stories. Anecdote. He says he gets messages every day, like 5 to 10 messages a day, from reservists in Gaza, even from police officers, telling him his actions give them strength, encouraging him to keep going. He also makes pro-IDF and pro-police videos, which fits that narrative.
Wow.
Oh, and he briefly mentions trying to confront Imamouda, the deputy prime minister, actually inside the Knesset.
Wow, inside the Knesset. That's targeting a very high-ranking official directly.
Yeah, a significant move.
And it brings us back to that fascinating symbiotic relationship you mentioned between his activism and the morale of people in uniform, that perceived validation he gets from security forces. It's a powerful affirmation for him, clearly. It directly influences his resolve, probably his methods too. It creates this feedback loop where his actions are seen as supportive by those on the front lines, which likely emboldens him further. And it reinforces his belief that what he's doing is not just right, but necessary, even the confrontational parts.
So wrapping this up, what does it all mean for us looking at this? We've seen Morichai David's active, multifaceted. There's the fearless direct conflict, his really powerful strategic use of social media. His political motivations seem deeply rooted, stemming from this strong sense of grievance. And now there's this strategic shift toward an organized, funded grassroots movement. He's moved from just individual actions to trying to build a whole counter with clear, ambitious goals.
Yeah, this deep dive really throws a spotlight on the intense polarization in part where online spaces, and now physical spaces too, become these battlegrounds, controlling the narrative. And it raises a really important question for us. What are the long-term societal implications? Kind of highly polarized, very direct act, especially when individuals feel valid by the front lines and they're driven by this urgent sense, moral imperative. Maybe a final thought. Consider how individuals fueled by such strong, how they can harness digital platforms, not just to get their own message out, but to actively try and reshape physical space, all while facing direct even threat. What does this evolving land and maybe for societal itself?